Hey, what's up everybody? My name's Andre Human Nature and I'm with D&B Academy. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to create your first liquid drum and bass track using FL Studio. If you're an Ableton user, we have a different video where we show you how to create your first drum and bass track using Ableton. So be sure to check that out if you're on Ableton. Now, this video is for complete beginners, so if you're a more advanced user, this is not the video for you. My goal with this video is to show a new producer how to start creating their first drum and bass track using FL Studio. And to do that, I've included a sample pack that you can download in the description. I've put the link down there. And this is what I call the Liquid D&B Starter Kit. It's a collection of sounds to help you create your first track. It's what it says on the box. So you get a collection of drums, some music samples, a piano, guitar, bells, a bass line. And we're going to use these sounds in this video to create our first track. I encourage you to go and download the pack. The link is in the description below. You can go and grab that pack and you can follow along and you can create your first track with me. So I'm really hyped to be able to do this and to bring this content to you guys. So if you do like it and you do enjoy this and you want to see more of this, like this video, drop a comment below, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future content. With that being said, let's get into the AW and let's start making this track. All right, so if this is the first time that you're using FL Studio, it can be a bit overwhelming as there's a lot of options. Don't worry about all this now because we're going to be using the most important features to start creating your first track. I'll be explaining things as I go, so you can discover how to use FL through the creation of this track. Now, after you open up FL, the first thing that I want to tell you about is this gray box up here. It's called the hint panel. And the magic part about the hint panel is anywhere that you hover your mouse over, inside this hint panel, it's going to tell you what it is, or it's going to tell you something about it. As an example, if we hover over here, it says view playlist. Here it says view channel rack. And if you look closely, it'll even tell you what hotkey it is. It'll show like around here. If we change some type of volume, it'll tell us the percentages and the decibels. So this hint panel will give us information about the software and about what we're trying to do. So it's super important. We're going to be using it for a lot of things. As long as you follow the hint panel, you can pretty much teach yourself how to use this software. Now, there are 4 main windows that you need to know about in FL Studio. You might be looking at my FL Studio and you're probably thinking, wait, this looks different than mine. I have done some minor edits. I've rearranged some things, but it generally looks the same. I don't have anything extra. I've just removed a few buttons. So your FL has everything as mine does. I'll show you the most important parts right now so we can get moving on with creating this track. The first important window that I want you to know about is this one called the playlist. Now, the playlist, or as I like to call it, the arrangement view, this is where we're going to be sequencing all of our sounds. This is where I'm going to arrange the samples, drop MIDI patterns, create automation clips. This is basically where we lay out the track and we arrange the track. The second window that I want you to know about is called the channel rack. It's this one down here. So this one is where we can load up instruments, we can load up synths, we can open up a sampler by using this add new channel button here. And also we can keep track of the sounds that are already in our track. So if we bring in audio samples, they will appear here. Now, an important part about this channel rack is this channel display filter. When you're using synths and patterns and MIDI clips and audio samples, you'll have to constantly come back here and just press display all. That way it'll show everything that we're using in the track. We'll run into this after and it'll make more sense. The third window that I want you to know about is the piano roll. You can access by clicking here, and the hotkey for this one is F7. Actually, just to go back, the hotkey of the playlist is F5. The hotkey of the channel rack is F6. And yeah, the hotkey of the piano roll is F7. So with this piano roll, this is where we can choose which instrument that we want, and we can start writing MIDI notes for this sound. So, we can write notes, we can make them as big and as small as we want them to be. And now, last but not least, I want to tell you about the mixer. It's this button right here, the hotkey is F9. Now, this is very important because this is where we're going to link all of our sounds and we can put them on whatever channel that we want. We can rename the channels. We can group the channels together. There's a lot of really cool things we can do here in the mixer. Also, this is where we can put on equalizers, an EQ. We can use compressors, filters, plugins like delay, reverb, and a whole bunch of stuff. So it's all done here in the mixer. And I will be explaining more about this as we go and build the track. So this might be a bit confusing if you are completely new, but don't worry about it, as we will be using all of these windows as we'll be going through making this track. So you'll be able to learn as you go. And another thing that's really important is to create drum and bass, we need to be at 174 beats per minute. So we're going to need to change our tempo to 174. To do that, it's going to be up here. There's this tempo box. It currently reads 130. I'm just going to left click. I'm going to hold down and drag up until we reach 174 beats per minute. So this is the tempo that I like to produce my drum and bass at. Some produce at 172. Also others at 170, even as high as 176. I've seen some go lower, some go higher. Me personally, I like to produce my liquid drum and bass at 174. Okay, so now that we've covered the main windows of FL Studio, we can dive in and start creating the track. And to do that, I've opened up the D&B Academy Liquid D&B Starter Kit Sample Pack. Again, the download link is in the description of this video. You can click on it, go to the website, and download the pack, open it up, and you can begin following along with me through this video. So to start things off, I want to start by creating the drums. And to do that, I'm going to click on the tops sample. I'm just going to drag that into the playlist or the arrangement view. Now that I have it here, I am going to click on it, and I am going to choose this paint tool, and I'm just going to click, and I'll make an 8-bar loop here. Now that I've laid down the hi-hats, I want to double click on it, and on this box up here where it says track, if we hover over it, we can see it says target mixer track. Well, if we actually click on the word track, it's a button. And if we click on it, it'll automatically route this to the first empty track on the mixer. Now that we've put the hi-hats here in the mixer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on this, and I'm going to click rename. I can see that the hotkey is F2. So I'm going to click that, and I'm going to call this hats. Let's go back to the sample pack. I'm going to grab the kick sample. I'm going to drop this into the playlist, and I'm going to do something similar. I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to click on the track button. I'm going to press our hotkey F2 on the mixer, and I'll rename this to kick. So now that we've got our kick on the mixer, let's start to sequence the kick to make it sound like a drum and bass beat. And to do that, I'm going to lay this kick on the first bar. So I'm going to put it on the first bar of every beat. And now I'm going to set the second kick on this bar right here. And this is going to give us that standard drum and bass beat. So to complete the beat, let's open up the sample pack and let's grab the snare sample. Now I'm going to lay this on every second and fourth beat. And this will create our standard drum and bass drum loop. So I'm hearing a little bit of a click at the end of the snare sample. So I'm just going to double click on it. And once we open it, we can see that we are in the sample. And this is the FL sampler. What I can do with this is under this pre-computed effects, there's this knob that says out. If you look at the hint panel, it says quick fade out. What it's going to do is it's going to do a volume fade on the sound. It doesn't have that click on the end anymore. It's sounding much better. Also, if we see the very beginning of the sample, it has this space. I can use this button, the sample start offset. I can just bring it back just a little bit. Looks pretty good now. Sounds spot on. So I'm going to track this to the mixer as well. I'm going to press F2, type in snare, and we have our snare plugged into the mixer. So now that we've built our drums, let's start creating the piano. Now I've dragged in the piano's samples. I'm going to right click on the track that it's on so I can solo the track. If I want to turn all of the sounds back on, I can just right click on it again. So I'm going to solo this track. Let's see what this sounds like. Okay, so actually I just heard something that we can do there. We can first just tidy up this sample a little bit. I'm grabbing this bar up here and I'm just left clicking it, dragging it to zoom in a bit. And there's these options here on the top of the arrangement view. It's the focus options. Now I'm gonna make sure it's on focus audio clips. So I can disable the stretch mode. I'm gonna make sure it's off. And I'm just gonna hold down my left Alt key. And while holding down Alt, it's gonna unlock the grid. I can just bring this back. Now this looks like it's hitting at the right time. So I can see that at the end here, there's no more samples. So I'm going to show you a trick that you can do with time stretching to fill that part out. Now to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the slice tool. When I click on that, I'm going to left click and slice down there. Then I'm going to click on the draw tool again. Now, if I stretch this sound, it's going to stretch this one as well because it's the same sample. So to edit this one alone, on the very top left corner of the sample, there's a little waveform. You can see this on every sample. This is actually a menu. And if I click on that menu, I can click and make unique. And now anything that I do to this sound, it's only going to happen to this sound and not the other part of it. Now that we've done that, I'm going to click on the stretch button. And I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to hold down the left Alt key to unlock the grid. And I'm going to drag that until it sits there perfectly. Now we've stretched this sound. So if we listen to it, we can hear that the piano just changed pitch. It doesn't sound like it did before. This is because we stretched it. So we need to double click on the sample. And here in the time stretching box, we can see that there's this mode. It's currently on resample. I want to change this to E3 generic. And what this is going to do is it's going to preserve the original pitch of the sample even when we stretch it. So let's have a listen now. Sounds much better. So we've edited these pianos a little bit. Let's make sure we can get it on the mixer before we start making too many changes. So I'm going to track that to the mixer, call it piano. And then this is a different sample. This is the sample number 2, as we can see here in the name. So I'm going to have to route this one as well. Now, to get this one on the same channel as the other piano is, which is on channel 8, I'm actually just going to click here on this box above track, and I'm going to hold down and drag my mouse up until I reach channel 8. So I've noticed that I want to do something similar right here. So I'm going to hold down my left Alt key so I can unlock the grid, and I'm going to slice right there. I want to turn off the stretch because I don't want to stretch anything right now. I just want to bring this back. I want to bring this one back, but I want to stretch this. So just as we did, I'm going to make this one unique. I'm going to turn on the stretch, hold down Alt to unlock the grid. I'll stretch it out. I'm going to disable the stretch mode. I'm going to double click on the sample, change the time stretching, E3 generic. Let's see how this sounds. Okay, that sounded pretty good. I'm going to make a sequence here. Let's see what I can do. I'm going to have a listen to the drums. This can help me give a metronome. Okay, I think that's sounding pretty good. So we're going to go with this. One thing I do want to do real quick is I want to make sure that these pianos are also on channel 8. So everything, it's routed to the piano channel. Just making sure this is all good. Okay, looks like that's all good to go. So now that we've created our piano, let's just take a step back and let's layer some percussion into the drums. I'm going to click here into the sample pack. Let's look for the percussion. I'm going to take this perc 01. I'm going to drop it here. And I'm going to layer it like this. So this can be a progression to the drums as it goes on. Let's see how this sounds. Okay, so the idea is there, but the execution would be done properly like this. What I've just done there is I've highlighted the whole loop by holding down my left control key, and I've just clicked, dragged across, highlight everything I need to do. Then once I have that, I'm going to hold down my left shift key. I'm going to shift, click, and drag across until I've been able to duplicate what I've got so far. So now we have a full 16-bar loop, which is known as a phrase. And when we're creating drum and bass, we're going to create the track in different phrases. We have this percussion. It starts coming in on the second half of the phrase, and this is going to act as a progression to the drums as the phrase goes on. So let's have a listen and let's see how that sounds. Okay, I think it's sounding awesome. Now that we have our percussion in, let's try to create a melody here to layer on top of this piano. So I've included this organ sample, and we're going to use MIDI this time. Now, if you listen to the sample on its own, it sounds like this. Let's just track it to the mixer real quick. I'm going to call it organ. And what we're going to do with this one is we're going to create a MIDI clip. So we're actually not going to use the audio. We're going to use the piano roll for this one. So to do that, I'm going to click on this pattern 1 button here on the pattern selector. I'm going to click on pattern 1, and I'm going to click it here. And now that we have our first pattern down, let's create a melody on this pattern with the organ. And to do this, I'm going to right click here. I'm going to make sure that on the channel rack, I can click on all on the channel display filter. I mentioned this earlier, but the reason why we want to choose all is because now it's going to show us everything that we have on the track. And I'm going to go down here to the organ, and I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to click on piano roll. So now that we've got this open, if I hit the different notes, I'll hear different keys of this organ. Okay, it's sounding good down here. So I'm just going to freestyle a melody. I'm just going to try a few different notes. I'm going to see what feels good to me, what sounds good in my ear, and we will go from there. Okay, so this melody is feeling pretty good. I'm just going to duplicate this across. Again, I hold down my left control, click, drag, highlight everything, hold down left shift, click, and drag over. Now that we've done this, I'm just going to make a slight variation on the end. Okay, so I think this is the melody here. Let's just have a listen off the top. Let's see how this sounds. sounding pretty cool. But I'm noticing that the drums just feel really loud, and it's kind of hard to hear this melody. So let's just do a little bit of gain staging. And what this is I'm just gonna balance the levels of the volumes of the different sounds, so I can get it to a point where it feels good. So I'm just gonna open up the mixer. I'm gonna press play. I'm gonna let it loop. And as it's looping, I'm gonna be bringing down the volume of the channels until I can get a balance that feels good. So in doing this, I've just realized that the percussion has not been routed to the mixer. So I'm going to double click on the percussion. I'm going to press the track button, F2, and we will title that percussion. Okay, that's feeling much better. I've just changed the volumes a little bit, just got a balance that is feeling good, and I'm happy with that. Now that we've created our melody, let's start layering in a bass line to help glue all of this together. To do this, I am going to open a bass guitar plugin. This is a stock FL plugin. It's called Boo Bass. And I'm going to use this because I'm feeling that I want to create this as my mid bass layer, and then we'll create a sub bass after. So if you don't know what mid bass and sub bass is, just don't worry about that right now. I'll explain that in just a second. There's usually two different layers to having a good bass. So I'll show you how we're going to create our mid bass layer. Now I'm going to press this detailed settings button so we can open up the button to be able to track this bass to the mixer. I'm going to rename that. I'm going to call that mid bass. And on its own, it sounds like this. Does not sound too good. So to make this sound better, we're going to use a audio processing effect to change the way it sounds. And I want to use a low pass filter. It's going to make it sound a bit deeper. It's going to remove those upper harmonics, and it's going to sound a lot better. So I'm going to open up here on one of the channels, Fruity Filter, and I want to use the low pass function. So to do this, I'm going to remove the resonance. I'm going to remove the high pass. And I'm going to bring this cutoff frequency, I'm going to bring it down. So if I press the key, we can see it sounds much deeper now. And just to emphasize the sound, before the filter, I'm going to put a Fruity Wave Shaper. And this is a form of distortion, of harmonic distortion. So it's a type of saturation in that case. And this is just going to boost the harmonics in our sound. For those of you who don't know what that means exactly, basically all it's going to do is it's going to make our sound more powerful. So I'm going to click on this point and I'm just going to drag it up. Really brings it out, right? Now that we've done that, I am going to open up a new pattern. So I'm going to change this pattern 1. I'm going to click drag up to pattern 2. And I'll place that pattern 2 down. Because if we don't change the pattern, we're going to be writing the MIDI on the same pattern as the melody. And things will get confusing when we're trying to structure the track. So we want to have different patterns for different sounds. Now, I'm going to right click on the Boo Bass, going to open up the piano roll, and I'm going to start writing a bass line to this track. I'm going to look at the sample. It says it's in BM, so it says it's in the key of B minor. So I'm going to go and choose the B key as our first note on the bass line. It's going to be our root note. I'm going to build everything off there. So I'm just going to play this sound, and let's start experimenting. Let's see what type of bass line I can come up with. Okay, so we've created our mid bass here, and I've just done this by ear, just going, seeing which notes sound right. I Some of them were placed incorrectly at first, but I heard right away that that sounds sour. That's not correct. So let me change it, and I was able to find the right notes. Um, this part, it could be difficult, but you have the notes here that you can copy these just to follow along. But what I would recommend is just go with your ear, go with what sounds best in the beginning. Music theory can be a bit complex. We will have future videos that can give you some cool tips on that. But for now, for your first experience, just go along with what's done here. And if you want to try something different, just follow your ears, see what sounds good, and just experiment. So I'm just going to duplicate this over. And now that we've got our mid bass, I want to create the sub bass. So that's the bottom layer of the bass. Now it's going to be the same exact notes. So I'm actually just going to copy these notes. And then we're going to go to the channel rack. I'm going to add a new channel, and I'm going to open the 3x oscillator. It's a 3x oscillator. And this is a synthesizer. We're going to create a sub bass. And to create a good sub bass, we just want a pure sine wave. So I'm going to make sure that each channel is on a sine wave. And I'm going to bring these knobs, these coarse knobs, all the way down to 0. So it's at its lowest octave. You're going to need headphones, or you're going to need a subwoofer to hear this part. You might not hear it if you're on a laptop, if you're on a cell phone, or if you're using iPod headphones. You're probably not going to hear this that well. So we want to get in that sub frequency range. And to do that, I'm going to make sure I'm hitting the lowest key on the keyboard. So I'm going to make sure I go to a new pattern once again, and I'm going to place this pattern down. And then I'm going to right click on the 3x oscillator. I'm going to click on the piano roll, and I'm going to paste what we copied. So just to take a step back, on our mid bass, I highlighted everything and I pressed Control C to copy. On the sub bass, I'm just pressing Control V to paste. So now that we've got it there, let's see how this sounds. It's a bit too high, so I'm going to press Control down arrow. It's going to bring it down an octave. Okay, now we're in that sub frequency range. This is that low sub range. So that's what I was looking for. It does feel a bit quiet though. So I'm going to open up the 3x oscillator. I'm going to press the detailed settings, and I will press the track button to put it on the mixer. I'm going to rename it sub bass, and I'm going to add some processing effects here to make the sub bass more powerful. And in order to do this, I'm going to first use a Fruity Wave Shaper, and we're going to boost the harmonics. So I'm actually going to bring this all the way up. It's going to make it with a lot more harmonics now. It's going to sound a lot louder. Actually sounds a bit overboard, but don't worry, because we're going to put here a Fruity Parametric EQ2. I'm going to click on the presets up here. I'm going to go 2 times to the right, and this gives us a low cut and a high cut. And I'm going to bring this top point here all the way down to around 125 hertz area. And if we look at the hint panel, that's where I can see the frequency. So I'm going down to around 125. And that's going to remove all these upper harmonics that were just added with the wave shaper. Now you might be asking, why are we removing the harmonics if we just added them in the first place? Well, that's because when we're boosting the harmonics, it's also boosting the fundamental frequency, which is what we need here. So by boosting the harmonics, we've boosted the fundamental, and I only want that fundamental. So I'm actually removing the harmonics, and we're just left with this stronger fundamental frequency. So it's still pretty loud because we really boosted this wave shaper all the way up. So what I'm going to do on slot 3 is I'm going to put a Fruity limiter, and I'm just going to leave it on its default setting. And what this is going to do is it's going to make sure it does not pass over 0 dB. So now that we've done that, we have a good sub bass. Let's see how it sounds. So the sub feels a bit overpowering. I'm just going to bring the volume down a little bit. Also, I've noticed that the mid bass shares some of the same frequencies that the sub bass does. So they're clashing, and that's causing it to be a bit muddy. So I'm going to have to put an EQ on the mid bass. I'm going to put a fruity parametric EQ too. I'm going to click on the preset to the right 2 times. And this time I'm going to use this lower one, and I'm going to bring it up to around, let's say, 90 hertz. And this is going to make it so we're opening the space down here for our sub bass. And there's going to be a little bit of overlap so the sounds can blend together. Now that we've created the bass, let's move on and let's layer some of the pads. So to layer these pads, I'm going to go back to the sample pack and let's choose this guitar. I'm going to bring in this guitar sample. To make this a bit more interesting, I'm going to click on the reverse button here under the pre-computed effects. Okay, it sounds pretty cool. I'm going to track this to the mixer. Let's call it a pad. And let's repeat this. Just going to bring the volume down just a little bit in the mixer. All right, so now that we've got our pad in, let's go back to the Liquid D&B starter kit sample pack and let's grab the bell sample. I'm going to drag that in and let's see how that sounds. All right, it sounds pretty cool, but I'm going to try to reverse this one. All right, it's sounding much better. I'm going to bring it over here into the progression. I'm thinking we're going to layer it here when the percussion starts to progress on the phrase. I'm also going to bring this reverse. I'm going to repeat that so it also progresses the phrase. And just like the other sounds, I'm going to double click it. I'm going to track on the mixer. I'm going to rename it, call it reverse. I'm going to bring the volume down a little bit. Let's see how that sounds. We have added this reverse sound. We have our drums, we have percussion, we have the piano, we have our mid bass, our sub bass, we have the organ melody. We've added this reverse guitar as a pad. Let's bring in a riser, and then we can start to structure this out to create some type of intro and then a drop. So let's just get back to the sample pack and let's click on the riser. Let's drag this in. I'm going to place it here at the end of the phrase. I'm going to double click it, track it to the mixer. We'll call it a riser, and I'll bring the volume down just like the other sounds. And let's see how that sounds. Sweet. This is sounding cool. So, all right. Let's start to structure this out and turn this into a more of an idea instead of just a loop. So currently we have all of the sounds playing at once. I'm just going to kind of bring these together just so we can get a better visual here. But if we look at it, we can see that we're playing all the sounds at the same time. They're all happening at the same time. So let's stretch this out horizontally and start to give each phrase its own specific arrangement here. So highlight everything. I'm going to hold down my left shift key. I'm going to click and drag over, then I'll let go. So now we have two phrases. I'm just going to do that one more time. So this way we have 4 phrases. Your standard drum and bass drop has 4 phrases. So that's why I've already stretched this out into 4 phrases. And as you can see, we have every sound playing all the time. So we can use a process of elimination to make it so some phrases have some sounds, other phrases have other sounds. And that way there'll be this sense of progression and a variation throughout the sound so it's not so loopy. So let's start this. I'm going to remove the pads on phrases 1 and 3. I'll remove the melody from 1 and 2. Also, I'll remove the risers from 1 and 3. And I will remove the piano from phrase 3. Again, just using the process of elimination, I just started to give some sounds its own space. So there isn't everything happening every single time. And let's also create some transition on the drums. So as I said earlier, drum and bass is created in phrases. So I'm going to look at each phrase, each 16-bar loop, and I'm going to go to the end, and I'm just going to make a slight transition here. So I'll remove some of the drums on this kick. So this kick here can trigger the drums to stop. Here I'll do something a bit different. Instead of at the end of this phrase, I'll do it in the beginning of this phrase. So again, that was in the beginning of phrase 3 instead of the end of phrase 2. And then what I'll do at the end of phrase 3, I'll do something similar like the end of phrase 1. So I'm just going to go delete this kick, this snare, and we'll do something like this. So let's see what it sounds like now that we've done some minor arrangements. That's how you can build your first drum and bass track using FL Studio. And as you can imagine, the process can get a lot more complex than what you've seen here today. There are many steps to learn, and it can be a pretty steep learning curve. So that's why we've created a free training that will teach you all the steps to how you should be approaching learning drum and bass production. To access this free training, you can go to dnbacademy.net. You'll find the free training there on the website, or you can access through the link in the description below. Don't forget to download the D&B Academy Starter Kit, which is a sample pack that we used in this video. It also includes the project files that were made in this video, so you can download those, you can open this up, you can see exactly how I got to this point. You could reverse engineer it, you could study it, whatever you want to do with it, it's yours for keeps. So that being said, you guys, thank you for watching. I really appreciate you being here with me. I hope you found this useful, and I hope this has inspired you to start creating your first liquid drum bass track. If you found this useful, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you can keep up to date with all of our new content as it releases. Also, we have an Instagram that we post there pretty much daily. So if you want some quick tips and tricks, be sure to check out our Instagram at dnb.academy. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video.